I am Nia, 32 years old, and right now I am staring at $1 million question that just shattered my family's perfect Thanksgiving dinner. Literally. My grandmother just slammed her crystal wine glass onto the mahogany table, pointing directly at me, demanding to know why an elderly white couple was living in the luxury vacation home she had purchased in my name. I sat there in my cheap sweater, clutching a fork with trembling hands because I had absolutely no idea what she was talking about. I did not own a vacation home. In fact, I had been homeless sleeping in the back seat of my Honda Civic for the past 90 days. That was the exact second I realized the people who were supposed to protect me were the ones who had destroyed my life. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to survive the ultimate betrayal from your own blood. The dining room in my parents' Atlanta mansion felt like a perfectly decorated trap. The air was stiflingly warm, heavy, with the rich scent of roasted turkey, expensive perfume, and unspoken tension. We were supposed to be celebrating Thanksgiving, playing the part of the perfect affluent black family. My mother Vivian sat at the head of the table. She was a prominent event director for our mega church, a woman who treated our family like a public relations campaign where public perception and social status were valued above human life. She sat there wearing a pristine designer dress, pouring expensive wine, and completely dominating the conversation. My father, Marcus, a retired business executive, sat opposite her, quietly nodding along to whatever she said while carving the meat with practiced precision. Next to me was my younger sister, Chloe, the family golden child, and a social media influencer whose entire lavish lifestyle was secretly funded by our parents. Sitting next to Chloe was her husband, Todd, a white commercial real estate broker who wore a perpetual smirk and carried a false sense of superiority that always made my skin crawl. I was the absolute outcast of this picture-perfect setup. I wore a faded black sweater, trying desperately to hide my exhaustion and the dark circles under my eyes. Nobody at that table knew that I was a senior cybersecurity forensic analyst who had recently contracted with federal agencies. To them, I was just the rebellious disappointment who refused to follow the family tradition of going to medical or law school, deciding to just play with computers instead. They also did not know the dark reality of my current situation. For 3 months, I had been parking my car in 24-hour grocery store lots, sleeping in the back seat wrapped in a thin, cheap blanket, and showering at a local gym. I was doing all of this because my identity had been brutally stolen, my credit score completely decimated, and my bank accounts frozen. I was living in my car while quietly pouring every last cent I could scrape together into launching my own cybersecurity firm, determined to claw my way back from rock bottom. The only reason I had even agreed to attend this Thanksgiving dinner was because of my grandmother Josephine. She is a self-made cosmetics billionaire who lives on the West Coast, and she rarely makes the trip down south. When Grandma Josephine enters a room, her presence demands absolute silence and respect. She is sharp, observant, and possesses a terrifying ability to see right through people. Throughout the entire dinner, she had been unusually quiet. She simply watched the dynamics unfold with keen eyes. She watched Chloe brag incessantly about her latest luxury shopping spree in the Bahamas. She watched Todd boast about his massive commercial real estate deals, tossing around industry buzzwords to make himself sound wealthy and important. She watched my mother pointedly ignore my empty glass while pouring expensive imported wine for everyone else at the table. The air in the room was thick with unspoken tension, a silent pressure cooker disguised as a holiday celebration. I kept my head down, pushing the sweet potatoes around my plate, simply counting the seconds until I could politely excuse myself and return to the freezing safety of my car. I wanted nothing more than to get through the night without a lecture about my life choices. I just wanted to eat a warm meal for the first time in weeks without being reminded of my supposedly inferior status in this house. But Grandma Josephine had other plans. Right as my mother cheerfully signaled for the hired catering staff to bring out the dessert, Grandma Josephine abruptly stood up. The room instantly fell dead silent. She did not yell immediately. Instead, she picked up her heavy crystal wine glass and slammed the base of it violently against the solid mahogany table. The sharp ringing sound cut through the room like a gunshot. The red wine inside her glass trembled violently, splashing over the rim and staining the pristine white tablecloth like blood. Everyone froze in absolute shock. My mother stopped talking mid-sentence, her silver serving spoon hovering awkwardly in the air. Todd spilled his drink directly onto his crisp white dress shirt. Chloe gasped aloud, dropping her phone onto her porcelain plate. Grandma Josephine said, her voice dropping the temperature in the room by 10 degrees. Her dark, fierce gaze locked onto me, piercing right through my exhausted facade. I have a very simple, very direct question for you. Why is an elderly white couple currently living in the $1 million vacation home in Savannah that I bought outright for you 2 years ago? The heavy silver fork slipped right out of my trembling fingers. It hit my plate with a loud ringing clatter, but the sound felt miles away. My heart hammered against my ribs so violently it physically ached. I stared back at the woman who had always been my secret inspiration, my mind racing at light speed to process the sheer impossibility of her words. The silence in the dining room was so absolute that I could hear the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock out in the hallway. I slowly looked around the table. Chloe suddenly looked completely terrified, her eyes darting frantically toward her husband. Todd shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his usual smug expression completely wiped away, replaced by a pale and sickly pallor. My father stared intently at his half-eaten turkey, refusing to make eye contact with a single person in the room. And my mother Vivian gripped the edge of the mahogany table so hard her knuckles turned completely white. $1 million vacation home. I whispered, my voice cracking under the crushing weight of the dead silence. Grandma, what house? I do not own a house in Savannah. I do not own a house anywhere. Grandma Josephine narrowed her eyes, studying my face with surgical precision. Do not play games with me, Nia. I transferred the deed and the keys to you exactly 24 months ago as a private trust investment. I drove past the property yesterday morning to surprise you, only to find strangers living there. Strangers who boldly told me they were enjoying their free retirement housing. So I will ask you again. Who are those people and why are they in your house? I could not breathe. My vision blurred as the absurdity of her question violently collided with the brutal, freezing reality of my daily life. I thought about the terrifying nights in my car, waking up in a cold sweat at every passing shadow. I thought about the endless, degrading phone calls to credit bureaus, begging them to believe that I had not opened 5 maxed-out credit cards in my own name. I thought about the hunger, the shame and the sheer desperation I had been fighting every single day while my own family treated me like a burden. Tears of pure confusion and absolute desperation stung my eyes as I looked right back at my grandmother. Grandma, I swear to you on my life, I have never seen a deed. I have never seen any keys. I am homeless. I have been sleeping in the back of my Honda Civic for 3 months. I park behind a grocery store every night just so I can feel safe enough to close my eyes. My identity was completely stolen, my credit was ruined, and I have absolutely nothing left. If I had $1 million house, why would I be freezing in a car every single night? A genuine gasp escaped Grandma Josephine. She looked at me, truly taking in my faded clothes, my tired eyes, and my pale face. For the first time all night, she saw past the polite mask I had been wearing. She saw the exhaustion. She saw the absolute truth. Then slowly, with the precision of a predator locking onto its prey, she turned her fierce gaze directly toward my mother. The silence broke with a violent scrape of wood against hardwood. My mother shot up from her chair so fast it tipped backward, crashing onto the dining room floor. She did not even flinch at the noise. Instead, she slammed both of her hands onto the table, leaning forward with a look of manufactured outrage that I had seen 1,000 times before. How dare you come into my home and spew these malicious, disgusting lies? Vivian shrieked, pointing a trembling manicured finger directly at my face. Mother, do not listen to a single word coming out of her mouth. She is completely delusional. She has been making up these sick fantasies for months just to torture us. I sat there stunned by the sheer velocity of her pivot. She was not just denying it, she was actively trying to rewrite reality in real time. I am not making anything up, I fired back, my voice shaking with a mixture of rage and exhaustion. My credit report shows 5 different accounts opened in Savannah. I have the police reports for identity theft. I have been sleeping behind a strip mall on a deflated air mattress. Do you really think I would choose to live like a stray dog, just to ruin your dinner? Yes, you absolutely would, my mother screamed, her voice echoing off the high ceilings of the mansion. Because you have always been sick with jealousy. You have always been obsessed with destroying your sister's happiness. You look at Chloe, you look at her beautiful marriage to Todd, her massive success, her perfect life, and it eats you alive. You could not stand the fact that you threw your own life away on those ridiculous computer games instead of going to law school like we planned. So now you want to drag us all down into the mud with you. Chloe took her cue perfectly. Right on schedule, the golden child buried her face in her hands and let out a dramatic, breathless sob. She slumped against Todd, clutching his crisp dress shirt as if she were about to faint. Why do you always do this to me? Nia, Chloe cried out, her voice muffled by Todd's shoulder. Why do you always have to ruin my holidays? I invited you here out of the goodness of my heart. I told Mom we should include you because I felt sorry for you. And this is how you repay us. By making up some insane story about a house to make me and my husband look bad in front of Grandma. Todd immediately wrapped his arm around Chloe, pulling her close and kissing the top of her head. He looked across the table at me, shaking his head with a look of profound, patronizing pity. Nia, we all know you have been struggling lately, Todd said, using his smooth commercial real estate voice. The voice he used to close deals and manipulate clients. You have been under a lot of stress. Financial stress can do terrible things to a person's mind. It can make you imagine things. It can make you paranoid. We can get you help, Nia. Chloe and I would be more than happy to pay for a psychiatric evaluation. We just want you to get better. There is no need for these wild conspiracy theories about identity theft and stolen houses. I stared at him, feeling a physical wave of nausea wash over me. The gaslighting was so coordinated, so seamless, that for a split second, I almost questioned my own sanity. They were actually trying to convince my grandmother, the sharpest woman I knew, that I was a paranoid schizophrenic who had hallucinated $1 million real estate transaction out of sheer jealousy. Do not you dare patronize me, Todd, I snapped, gripping the edge of the table. You know exactly what happened to my credit. You know exactly why my social security number was flagged. Vivian slammed her hand on the table again, refusing to let me finish a sentence. Do not speak to your brother-in-law that way, she yelled, her chest heaving as she stepped around the fallen chair. Todd has done nothing but try to welcome you into this family. He is a respected businessman in this community. He provides beautifully for your sister. And you sit there, in your dirty clothes, bringing your toxic negative energy into our home, trying to poison your grandmother's mind against the only people who actually care about you. She turned to Grandma Josephine, suddenly shifting her tone from aggressive rage to a desperate, tearful plea. Mother, you have to understand. Naya has not been right in the head for years. Ever since she dropped out of her legal studies, she has been spiraling. She refuses to let us help her. She pushes us away and then creates these elaborate victim narratives to excuse her own failures. We have tried everything. We have prayed for her. Our entire church congregation has prayed for her. But she refuses to seek the professional help she clearly needs. My father, Marcus, finally found his voice. He stood up slowly, positioning himself next to my mother, presenting a united front. He refused to look at me, keeping his eyes fixed on Grandma Josephine. Vivian is telling the truth. Mother Josephine, Marcus said, his deep voice, trying to project a calm authority that completely contradicted the sweat beading on his forehead. Nia has been extremely troubled. She has a history of erratic behavior. We did not want to burden you with the details of her mental health struggles, because we know how much you worry. But she has been prone to these explosive episodes. We suspect she might have sold that Savannah property herself, squandered the money on one of her failed tech ventures, and is now experiencing some sort of dissociative episode to avoid taking responsibility. I felt the air completely leave my lungs. My own father, the man who had taught me how to ride a bike, who had read me bedtime stories, was standing in his formal dining room, looking my grandmother in the eye and calmly assassinating my character to cover up a felony. He was willingly throwing me under the bus, labeling me as a mentally unstable failure, all to protect the pristine image of his wife and his golden child. "You are lying," I said, my voice dropping to a harsh, trembling whisper. "You are all lying to cover your own tracks." I did not sell anything. I have been surviving on dollar menu food and sleeping with a baseball bat in my passenger seat for protection. You know I would never ask Grandma for anything. You know I have always worked for every single thing I have. "Stop playing the victim!" Vivian shrieked, moving closer to me, her eyes wild with a terrifying mixture of fear and fury. "You have always been the victim. You are a 32-year-old woman who still blames her mother for all of her failures. If you are homeless, it is because you are lazy and incompetent. If your credit is ruined, it is because you do not know how to manage your finances. It has nothing to do with us. We have given you everything, and you have squandered it all because you simply cannot stand the fact that Chloe is better than you." Chloe peeked out from Todd's shoulder, dabbing her completely dry eyes with a linen napkin. "I forgive you, Nia," Chloe said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Even after you try to ruin Thanksgiving, I still forgive you, because I know it is the illness talking, not my real sister." The performance was Oscar-worthy. If I had not been the one actually freezing in a car for 3 months, if I had not spent hours poring over the fraudulent credit card statements, tracing the IP addresses of the purchases directly to Chloe's favorite luxury boutiques, I might have actually believed them. They were an impenetrable wall of denial, perfectly synchronized to deflect any blame and project all the guilt onto me. I looked at Grandma Josephine. She had not moved a single inch. She had not interrupted Vivian's screaming, nor had she reacted to Chloe's fake tears or Todd's patronizing offers of psychiatric help. She simply sat there in her tailored suit, her posture immaculate, her hands neatly folded in her lap, watching the chaotic, deafening performance of my family, with eyes as cold and unforgiving as a winter storm. Vivian took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to compose herself. She reached out and placed a trembling hand on Grandma Josephine's shoulder. "Please," Mother Vivian pleaded softly, playing the exhausted, heartbroken parent. "Let us just enjoy our Thanksgiving dinner. Let Todd call a private car to take Nia to a nice hotel for the night. We will pay for it. We will get her the psychiatric help she needs tomorrow. But please do not let her toxic delusions destroy our family holiday." I stood my ground, digging my fingernails into my palms so hard they almost drew blood. They thought they had won. They thought their sheer volume and coordinated gaslighting would be enough to silence me and confuse my grandmother. They thought they could sweep my ruined life under the rug and send me away to a hotel to be dealt with quietly. They thought I was still the powerless, insecure girl who used to back down every time my mother raised her voice. But they were wrong. I did not back down. I just stared right back into my mother's eyes, preparing to dismantle her entire fraudulent existence piece by piece. Chloe scoffed loudly. The sound cut through the heavy silence like a serrated knife. She tossed her hair over her shoulder and leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. A smug, disdainful smirk spread across her perfectly contoured face. She looked at me the way someone might look at a stain on their shoe. "Here we go again," Chloe mocked, her voice dripping with venom and artificial exhaustion. "The great Nia tragedy. You are always playing the victim. It is honestly pathetic. You are pulling the exact same stunt you pulled 5 years ago when Mom and Dad finally had enough and kicked you out of the house." Todd chuckled softly beside her, shaking his head as if dealing with a petulant child. Chloe fed off his reaction, emboldened by her husband's support. "You could not handle the pressure of law school." Chloe continued, her voice rising so everyone in the room could hear her revisionist history. "You were failing your classes. You embarrassed this entire family. Mom and Dad gave you every opportunity to be successful, and you threw it all away to become a glorified computer repairman. You chose to be a failure. And now just because you hit rock bottom, you want to crash my Thanksgiving dinner and blame your miserable life on us. My eyes slowly moved from my mother's pale face and locked directly onto Chloe. I did not blink. I did not raise my voice. I let a cold, deadpan silence stretch across the table until Chloe's smirk began to falter under the weight of my stare. I was not kicked out. I said, my voice so calm and quiet that the entire room had to hold its breath just to hear me. I walked out, and we all know exactly why. Because you were a dropout, Chloe snapped back, though her voice wavered slightly. Because of $80,000, I stated clearly, letting the number hang in the air. Chloe's mouth snapped shut. The color instantly drained from her face. Beside her, Todd frowned, his brow furrowing in genuine confusion. He looked at his wife, then at me. $80,000. I repeated, turning my gaze to my mother, who was now gripping the table so tightly her arms were trembling. Tell the table, Vivian. Tell Grandma Josephine why I actually left law school. Tell them about the private student loans you forced me to co-sign under the guise of paying for my tuition. Nia, stop this right now, my mother hissed, her eyes darting frantically toward my grandmother. I will not stop. I fired back, my voice gaining volume and lethal precision. I found out during my second semester that the tuition had never been paid. I was facing expulsion. When I pulled my credit report, I discovered that $80,000 in private student loans had been dispersed directly into a joint account you controlled. But that money never went to the university. Did it, Mom? I turned my piercing glare back to my sister. Chloe looked like she was going to be sick. That money went to you, Chloe, I said, pointing a finger directly at her chest. It went to funding your pathetic illusion of a high society lifestyle. $80,000 of my debt paid for your Chanel bags, your Prada shoes, your weekly trips to the luxury salon, and that ridiculous leased Mercedes you drove. That is a lie, Chloe stammered, her voice pitching up in panic. She grabbed Todd's arm. Todd, she is making this up. She is crazy. I have the bank transfer receipts saved on an encrypted hard drive, I stated without missing a beat. Every single dollar that was borrowed in my name was systematically transferred into your personal checking account. Mom forced me to take on a mountain of debt that would ruin my financial future, all so you could afford the designer bait required to go hunting for a rich white husband. The word struck like a physical blow. Todd physically recoiled from Chloe, his eyes widening in shock. He pulled his arm out of her grasp. Todd had always believed Chloe came from a wealthy, established family. He believed her designer wardrobe and lavish lifestyle were the result of generational wealth. Finding out that his wife had essentially been wearing stolen goods funded by her sister's crippling student debt shattered the fragile foundation of his superiority. Wait a minute, Todd said, his voice dropping its condescending tone. Chloe, what is she talking about? You told me your parents bought you that car. You told me your trust fund paid for those trips to Miami when we first met. Todd, please. Chloe whimpered, tears of actual panic welling in her eyes now. Do not listen to her. She is just trying to tear us apart. She used my future to buy your attention, Todd, I said mercilessly, driving the nail deeper. My mother sacrificed my legal career and my credit score so her golden child could play dress-up and trap a real estate broker. When I confronted them about the missing money, my mother told me that Chloe needed the investment more than I did because Chloe actually had a chance at marrying into high society. When I refused to take out another fraudulent loan for her, they told me I was a selfish, ungrateful daughter. So I packed my bags and I walked out the front door. I leaned forward, resting my hands on the mahogany table, making sure my mother saw the absolute lack of fear in my eyes. I did not drop out because I was failing. I said, my voice echoing with years of suppressed rage. I dropped out because I refused to let you bankrupt me before I even turned 22. I spent the next 5 years working grueling night shifts, fixing servers and writing code just to pay off the debt you stole from me. I built my career from the ground up while you two paraded around Atlanta pretending you were royalty. That is enough. The explosive shout came from the other end of the table. My father, Marcus, slammed his massive fist down on the wood so hard the crystal glasses rattled dangerously. He shot up from his chair, his face flushed a deep, furious crimson. The veins in his neck bulged against the collar of his expensive dress shirt. "I said that is enough," Nia Marcus bellowed, his voice booming with the authoritative tone he used to intimidate his subordinates. "You come into my house, you eat my food, and you dare to spew this absolute filth at my dining table. You will close your mouth right this second." For a fraction of a second, the old instincts flared up. The childhood conditioning that told me to shrink, to apologize, to cower, when the patriarch of the family raised his voice. But the woman standing in this dining room was not a frightened college student anymore. I was a woman who had survived sleeping in freezing parking lots. A raised voice meant absolutely nothing to me now. I did not flinch. I stood up straight, matching my father's imposing posture, and stared directly into his furious eyes. "Or what, Marcus?" I challenged, dropping the title of father completely. "What are you going to do? You are going to yell at me to protect the thieves sitting next to you. You stood by and watched your wife steal my future to buy purses for your favorite daughter. You knew exactly where that $80,000 went, and you did not lift a single finger to stop it. You are just as guilty as they are." "You disrespectful little brat," Marcus snarled, taking a threatening step around the table toward me. "I should have let you rot on the streets years ago. You have brought nothing but shame to the Harrison name." "The Harrison name is a joke," I fired back, my voice ringing out clear and steady. "It is a cheap, hollow facade built on stolen credit and unpaid debts. And if you take one more step toward me, I will gladly call the police and let them sort out the fraudulent signatures on my loan documents right here and now." Marcus froze in his tracks. The threat of police intervention, of a public scandal that could reach the ears of their precious church congregation, was the only thing capable of halting his rage. He stood there, breathing heavily, his fists clenched at his sides, completely powerless. The dining room descended into a suffocating, heavy silence. The elegant Thanksgiving dinner lay abandoned and growing cold. Chloe was openly weeping now, not for me, but because Todd was staring at her with profound disgust. My mother looked like she was going to pass out, her chest rising and falling erratically as she desperately tried to avoid Grandma Josephine's gaze. Grandma Josephine simply sat at her place, her face an unreadable mask of stone. She had not intervened to stop my father. She had not told me to quiet down. She was letting the poison bleed out of this family, watching the pristine image of her son and daughter-in-law disintegrate right before her very eyes. The heavy oak double doors of the dining room suddenly swung open, breaking the suffocating silence. It was not one of the hired caterers returning to clean up the spilled wine. A tall, imposing man stepped into the room. He wore a razor-sharp charcoal suit and carried a thick leather briefcase. He moved with a slow, deliberate, measured pace that commanded absolute authority, his polished shoes thudding heavily against the hardwood floor. As he approached the table, he seemed to tower over my parents, casting a long, intimidating shadow that instantly swallowed my father's remaining bravado. This was Mr. Desmond. I recognized him immediately from the few times he had visited our home when I was a child. He was Grandma Josephine's personal attorney, a man whose reputation in the corporate legal world was nothing short of legendary. He did not deal in family squabbles. He dealt in ruthless, ironclad legal execution. Grandma Josephine finally moved. She did not look at my parents. She kept her eyes fixed straight ahead and gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Mr. Desmond stopped at the center of the table, directly between my mother and Todd. He unlatched his leather briefcase with a sharp click that made Chloe flinch in her seat. He reached inside and withdrew a thick stack of legal documents bound by a heavy blue legal cover. He did not hand them to my father, the supposed patriarch of the house. He bypassed my mother entirely. He placed the heavy stack of papers directly onto the mahogany table right in front of Grandma Josephine, though he angled them so that the bold black text on the front page was visible to everyone. "I have executed your request, Mrs. Harrington," Mr. Desmond said, his voice a deep, resonant baritone that completely filled the dining room. His tone was entirely clinical, entirely devoid of the emotional chaos that had just torn our family apart. I have completed a comprehensive asset trace and title search on the Savannah property, along with a full audit of the associated municipal tax records and recent transfer histories. My father swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. Desmond, what is the meaning of this? This is a private Thanksgiving dinner. Mr. Desmond slowly turned his head to look down at my father. The sheer weight of his gaze forced my father to shrink back into his chair. I am here in my capacity as legal counsel for the grantor of the property in question, Mr. Desmond stated coldly, and we are currently looking at a highly irregular, highly concerning chain of custody regarding a real estate asset assessed at $1.2 million. He reached forward and flipped open the blue cover. He began laying out crisp white documents onto the table like a dealer laying out cards in a high-stakes casino game. 2 years ago, my client purchased the Savannah estate entirely in cash. Mr. Desmond explained, his finger tapping the first document. The deed was transferred directly and exclusively into the name of Nia Harrison. It was a clean, unencumbered transfer. However, 8 months ago, a rapid succession of legal maneuvers altered that ownership. I stared at the papers, my heart hammering against my ribs. 8 months ago. That was right around the time I first noticed the fraudulent charges on my credit report. That was right when my life began to systematically fall apart. According to the county clerk's office, Mr. Desmond continued, his voice echoing in the silent room. The property is no longer in Nia Harrison's name. The deed was transferred to a newly formed corporate entity named the Harrison Family Trust. My eyes darted to my mother. Vivian was staring at the table, her breathing shallow and rapid. Chloe was furiously biting her lower lip, staring at her husband. I pulled the incorporation documents for this trust, Mr. Desmond said, laying another stamped document on the table. The Harrison Family Trust lists 2 primary trustees with absolute executive control over the assets. The first is Vivian Harrison. The second is Todd Miller. The room seemed to spin. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. A trust. They had not just sold the house behind my back. They had systematically absorbed it into a legal fortress designed to keep me locked out forever. And they had put Todd, the condescending, arrogant outsider who had married my sister, in direct control of $1 million asset that my grandmother had bought for me. Todd immediately sat up straighter, adjusting the collar of his wine-stained shirt. He tried to put on his best professional face, the one he used to charm naive clients. Now Mr. Desmond Todd began, his voice dripping with fake professional courtesy. As a fellow expert in the real estate sector, you must understand how these family trusts operate. We were simply engaging in standard wealth preservation. Nia was in no position to manage a luxury property. We took the necessary fiduciary steps to protect the asset and ensure the property taxes were paid. We placed those lovely elderly tenants in the home to generate passive income and keep the property maintained. It was entirely above board. Mr. Desmond did not blink. He stared down at Todd with an expression of absolute disgust. I understand corporate structure perfectly, Mr. Miller. What I also understand is the legal requirement for consent. Mr. Desmond turned his attention back to the documents. He pulled out one final packet of paper thicker than the rest and slid it directly across the table toward me. In order to transfer $1 million property out of an individual's name and into a trust, you must have the explicit, notarized consent of the title holder. Mr. Desmond said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, quiet register. According to the county records, the Harrison Family Trust executed this transfer using a general power of attorney. I looked down at the document resting in front of me. The header read, General Power of Attorney and Asset Assignment. It granted Vivian Harrison and Todd Miller the absolute right to sign contracts, transfer real estate, and manage financial accounts on my behalf. It essentially stripped me of my own legal autonomy and handed the keys to my life over to the 2 greediest people I knew. But that was not the part that made my blood run cold. I flipped to the last page of the document. There on the signature line was my name, Nia Harrison. It was an electronic signature accompanied by a digital timestamp and a DocuSign verification code. I stared at the digital ink, feeling a profound, terrifying violation wash over me. While I was rationing gas money so I could keep my car running on cold nights, while I was crying in the parking lot of a 24-hour gym because my debit card was declined for a $3 coffee, my mother and my brother-in-law had forged my consent. They had digitally impersonated me to steal a piece of property that could have changed my life. They did not just watch me drown, they actively tied the weights to my ankles and pushed me under. I did not sign this, I whispered, my voice trembling with a mixture of horror and mounting fury. I picked up the paper, holding it up for Grandma Josephine to see. I never saw this document. I never authorized a trust. I never gave Todd or my mother the right to manage a single penny of my money. This is a complete forgery. My mother lunged forward, her hands slamming onto the table. "Stop lying, Nia!" Vivian shrieked, her voice cracking with desperation. "You signed it. You agreed to it. You were having another one of your mental breakdowns. You called me crying, saying you could not handle the pressure of your failed startup, and you begged us to help you manage your finances. You gave us permission." "Yes," Todd chimed in quickly, nodding along with my mother's frantic lie. "We have the email chain to prove it. You sent us the authorization yourself. You are just having a lapse in memory because of your psychological issues. You probably forgot you signed the electronic document." I slowly lowered the paper, placing it back onto the table. I looked at Todd, then at my mother. The sheer audacity of their lie was breathtaking. They were doubling down on the mental health narrative, trying to convince a powerhouse lawyer and a billionaire matriarch that I was simply too crazy to remember signing away $1 million. "You think I forgot?" I asked, my voice deadly calm. "You think my brain is so broken that I casually clicked a button to hand over a luxury estate to a brother-in-law I despise?" "It is the truth," Vivian insisted, turning her pleading eyes to Grandma Josephine. "Mother, you have to believe us. Nia has been unwell. She signed that power of attorney voluntarily because she knew she was incapable of handling adult responsibilities. We stepped in to protect the family wealth. We saved that house from going into foreclosure. We are the ones who protected your investment." Grandma Josephine did not respond to my mother. She slowly turned her head and looked up at Mr. Desmond. Mr. Desmond reached into his briefcase one more time. He did not pull out another legal document. He simply stood there, his hands resting on the back of the empty chair next to him, his imposing figure casting a shadow right over Todd. "A digital signature is a legally binding mechanism," Mr. Desmond stated, his eyes locked onto Todd. "But unlike a physical signature, it leaves a very specific, very undeniable digital footprint. It tracks the exact time, date, and IP address of the device used to execute the document." Todd's face suddenly went entirely slack. The arrogant confidence he had been projecting just seconds prior vanished completely, replaced by the stark, terrified realization of a man who suddenly understands he has walked blindly into a trap. I did not need Mr. Desmond to explain the rest. I was a cybersecurity forensic analyst. I tracked digital footprints for a living. I looked down at the timestamp printed beneath my forged signature, then slowly raised my eyes to meet Todd's terrified gaze. The heavy silence in the room stretched until it felt like the air itself was suffocating us. I watched the gears turning behind Todd's pale blue eyes. He was cornered, but men like Todd do not surrender when they are cornered. They pivot, they manipulate, they dig their claws into the deepest vulnerabilities of the people around them. Slowly, the color began to return to his face. He swallowed hard, adjusting his tailored suit jacket. And then he actually smiled. It was a chilling, perfectly constructed smile that did not reach his eyes. He stood up from his chair, moving with an exaggerated calmness, and draped a heavy protective arm around Chloe's shoulders. The dining room chandelier cast a harsh shadow across half of his face, making his features look sharp and predatory. "Of course, the IP address traces back to our house," Todd said, his voice dropping into a smooth, deeply patronizing rhythm. He looked directly at Grandma Josephine, completely bypassing Mr. Desmond. "There is no grand conspiracy here, Mrs. Harrington. The digital footprint points to our residence because Nia was sitting at our kitchen table when she signed it." I stared at him, my fingernails digging so deeply into my palms that my skin throbbed. He was creating a brand new lie on the spot, weaving it flawlessly into the evidence Mr. Desmond had just presented. She came to us in the middle of the night about 8 months ago. Todd continued, his tone dripping with fake brotherly concern. She was in a terrible state, completely hysterical, unwashed, talking a mile a minute about how people were chasing her and how she was about to launch some massive federal cybersecurity company. It was heartbreaking to witness. We brought her inside, gave her a warm meal, and let her sleep in our guest room for 3 days while she detoxed from whatever stress was causing her manic episode. "That is a complete fabrication," I stated, my voice ringing out firm and steady. "I was in Seattle attending a cybersecurity conference. I have the flight records and the hotel receipts." Todd tightened his grip on Chloe, who let out another perfectly timed, trembling sigh. He looked at me with an expression of profound, manufactured pity. "Nia, please," Todd said softly, as if speaking to a frightened toddler. "You do not have to pretend anymore. We are your family. We know about your struggles. You have been fighting these severe depressive episodes and manic delusions since your college days." He reached into his breast pocket and withdrew a folded stack of papers. He gently placed them on the table, sliding them toward Grandma Josephine. I recognized the letterhead immediately. It was the logo of the university health clinic I had visited years ago when the weight of my mother's financial abuse had first driven me into a deep depression. "Those are her medical records from her sophomore year," Todd explained, shaking his head with a sorrowful look. "Severe clinical depression, anxiety, dissociative tendencies. She dropped out of her legal studies because her mind simply could not handle the reality of adult responsibilities. When she showed up at our house 8 months ago, she was terrified that she was going to lose the Savannah property because she had not paid the taxes and had no idea how to manage an estate of that magnitude." He leaned forward, resting his free hand on the mahogany table, positioning himself as the ultimate savior of the Harrison family wealth. "She begged us to take over," Todd said smoothly. "She knew she was about to spiral. She was talking about liquidating the entire $1 million property to fund this imaginary startup she keeps mentioning. She wanted to gamble away the beautiful gift you gave her on some pipe dream." Chloe and I stepped in to save her from herself. We had her log into her email on our home computer. We set up the family trust to protect the asset, and she signed the power of attorney willingly. We are just holding it for her. We are keeping it safe so she does not end up truly homeless and destitute. The sheer magnitude of his deception was paralyzing. He had taken my trauma, my past struggles with mental health, and weaponized them to justify stealing my property. He painted me as a delusional, unstable woman who needed her wealthy, competent brother-in-law to rescue her from her own incompetence. Right on cue, Vivian completely broke down. My mother collapsed back into her chair, covering her face with both hands. She let out a loud, wretched sob that echoed off the dining room walls. She reached into her designer handbag, pulled out a lace handkerchief, and pressed it against her eyes. "It has been a living nightmare," Vivian cried, her voice trembling with the perfect amount of maternal anguish. "Mother, you have no idea the hell we have been through trying to keep this girl alive. We have tried to get her into residential treatment facilities. We have offered to pay for the best therapists in Atlanta. But she runs away. She changes her phone number. She disappears into the city and then comes back with these wild, aggressive accusations." My mother lowered her handkerchief, looking at Grandma Josephine with red, watery eyes. She was putting on the performance of a lifetime, playing the exhausted, suffering matriarch who had sacrificed everything for a broken child. "I did not want to tell you," Vivian wept, reaching out to grasp my father's hand for support. "I wanted to protect you from the shame of it all. Nia is not a cybersecurity expert. She fixes broken laptops at a strip mall. This whole narrative about federal contracts and stolen identities is a delusion she created to cope with the fact that she threw her life away. When Todd and Chloe took over the Savannah house, it was an act of pure family devotion. They took on the financial burden of managing a massive estate just to make sure Nia would have something left when she finally regains her sanity. They were a unified, impenetrable front. Todd provided the calm, rational logic of a businessman protecting assets. Vivian provided the raw, emotional weight of a heartbroken mother. Chloe provided the silent, suffering presence of the loyal sister. Together, they had constructed a narrative so airtight, so heavily reliant on the stigma of mental illness, that they truly believed they had neutralized the threat of the IP address entirely. I stood alone on the other side of the table listening to them dismantle my reality. I felt the cold, hard weight of the car keys in my pocket, the keys to the Honda Civic where I had spent the last 90 nights freezing, crying, and fighting to rebuild my ruined credit. I thought about the days I went entirely without food just to afford the server hosting fees for my company. I thought about the relentless, exhausting grind of proving my worth to federal contractors while my own mother used my social security number to buy luxury shoes. They wanted me to break. They wanted me to start screaming, to start throwing things, to completely lose my temper so they could point at me and say, look at the crazy girl. We told you she was unstable. But I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not give them a single ounce of the emotional reaction they were banking on. I simply stood there, my posture completely rigid, breathing slowly and evenly. I was letting them dig their own graves. I was letting them pile lie upon lie, tying themselves so deeply into this story of a voluntary signature and a protective family trust that there would be absolutely zero escape when I finally dropped the hammer. I looked at Mr. Desmond. The imposing lawyer had not moved. He simply watched the performance with the detached clinical observation of a man who dealt with corporate fraud on a daily basis. He did not look convinced. He looked like he was waiting for my command. Then I looked at Grandma Josephine. The matriarch of the family had not offered a single word of comfort to my weeping mother. She had not acknowledged Todd's smooth explanations. She sat with her hands neatly folded, her gaze shifting slowly from Todd's fake reassuring smile to my mother's tear-stained face and finally resting on me. I took a slow, deep breath, letting the freezing calm of absolute certainty wash over my entire body. They had played their best cards. They had used my medical history, my past depression, and their societal status to try and crush me. It was a brilliant, terrifyingly effective strategy. But it was about to backfire spectacularly. "You are right about one thing, Todd," I said, my voice slicing through my mother's fake sobbing. My voice was steady, conversational, completely devoid of the panic they expected. A digital signature is binding, but the platform you used to execute that document, the platform you specifically routed through your home IP address, requires a two-factor authentication protocol. Todd's protective grip on Chloe's shoulder suddenly went completely rigid. The fake, patronizing smile vanished from his face for the second time that night. I took a step forward, closing the distance between myself and the table, holding Todd's panicked gaze with absolute, unyielding intensity. In order to legally finalize that signature, I continued, my words landing like heavy stones in the silent room. A unique 6-digit verification code is automatically sent to the registered phone number of the signee. You have to physically enter that code within a 10-minute window to validate the document. My registered phone number has not changed in 10 years. And exactly 8 months ago, on the night you claim I was sitting in your guest room having a manic episode, I received that text message. But I was not in your house. I was in a hotel room in Seattle, Washington. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone, tapping the screen to open the encrypted archive file I had spent the last 3 months carefully building. And because I actually am a cybersecurity expert, Todd, I added, my voice dropping to a lethal whisper. I did not just ignore that text message. I traced the unauthorized access request directly to your personal email account. And then I started digging. I placed my phone face up on the table, sliding it right next to Mr. Desmond's legal documents. The screen was glowing brightly, displaying a highly detailed, irrefutable digital log that was about to turn this lavish Thanksgiving dinner into a crime scene. The glowing screen of my phone sat there on the mahogany table like a ticking bomb. Todd stared at the two-factor authentication logs, the blood completely gone from his face. For a moment, nobody breathed. The digital proof was absolute, irrefutable, and sitting right next to the forged legal documents. But my family did not build their empire on surrender. They built it on aggressive, relentless denial. The room suddenly felt as if it had violently tilted on its axis. The atmosphere grew thick, claustrophobic, and incredibly dizzying. My mother moved, first stepping quickly around the dining table to flank my right side. Chloe abandoned her fake weeping and mirrored my mother, moving quickly to my left. My father, Marcus, took 2 heavy steps forward, planting his massive frame directly in front of me. They were boxing me in, physically trapping me against the edge of the table. The warm, inviting lighting of the Thanksgiving dinner now felt like the harsh, oppressive glare of an interrogation room. My mother's voice dropped the heartbroken act and morphed into something sharp and frantic. She reached out, attempting to snatch my phone from the table, but Mr. Desmond swiftly placed his large hand firmly over the device, protecting the evidence. Vivian recoiled, her eyes wild, and turned her desperate gaze toward Grandma Josephine. "Do you see what she is doing?" "Mother," Vivian shouted, her voice shrill, clawing at the air. "Do you see the lengths this sick girl will go to? She fixes computers for a living. She knows how to manipulate data, how to change numbers on a screen to make it look like Todd did something wrong. She fabricated this entire digital log just to frame him. This is exactly what her doctors warned us about years ago: the paranoia, the elaborate delusions. She creates these alternate realities where everyone is out to get her." I looked at Grandma Josephine, fully expecting her to see right through the blatant absurdity of my mother's new lie. But my grandmother did not look at Vivian. She looked directly at me. Her dark, calculating eyes swept over my frayed sweater, my exhausted posture, and the desperate intensity in my face. For the first time all evening, I saw a flicker of genuine skepticism cross her features. She looked at the glowing screen under Mr. Desmond's hand, and then she looked back at my hollow, sleep-deprived eyes. "Nia," Grandma Josephine said, her tone cautious, testing the waters. "These are highly sophisticated technical documents. Your mother is claiming you altered them. Tell me the absolute truth right now. Are you well? Are you seeing things clearly? Or are you manipulating the situation to punish your sister?" The question felt like a physical knife twisting in my gut. The one person in this room I respected, the woman who had bought me that house to secure my future, was actually considering the possibility that I had lost my mind. The gaslighting was working. My parents had planted the seed of my insanity so deeply and watered it with such theatrical conviction that even my fiercely intelligent grandmother was pausing to question my sanity. "I am perfectly sane, Grandma," I stated, my voice ringing with absolute clarity. "I did not alter anything. This is a federal crime they committed against me." But before I could point to the IP logs again, my father unleashed a terrifying roar. He lunged forward, closing the final inch of space between us. His massive hand shot up, his thick index finger pointing directly between my eyes, so close I could feel the heat radiating from his skin. The heavy scent of his expensive cologne mixed with the metallic smell of pure adrenaline. "You will shut your mouth this instant," Marcus commanded, his voice vibrating with a barely contained explosive violence. "I have had enough of this circus. I have tolerated your disrespect, your jealousy, and your absolute refusal to be a normal functioning member of this family. But you will not stand in my dining room on Thanksgiving Day and destroy the reputation I have spent 30 years building in this city. You will not ruin your sister's marriage with your psychotic, fabricated computer tricks." He leaned in closer. His imposing frame blocked out the light from the chandelier, casting me in a dark, suffocating shadow. The walls of the room felt like they were pressing inward, crushing the air straight out of my lungs. "I am giving you one chance, Nia," my father snarled, every word dripping with a lethal, terrifying threat. "You are going to look at your grandmother and you are going to admit that you made this all up. You are going to tell her that you forgot you signed that power of attorney because you were in the middle of a depressive breakdown. You will apologize to Todd, you will apologize to Chloe, and you will drop this ridiculous fantasy right now." I stared into his furious, bloodshot eyes. "I am not apologizing to the people who stole my life," I said, refusing to blink, refusing to let him see even a fraction of the terror threatening to consume me. Marcus's face hardened into a mask of pure, ruthless determination. He slowly pulled his smartphone from his tailored suit jacket, holding it up for me to see. "Then you leave me no choice," he said, his voice dropping to a low, menacing growl. "You want to play the victim? Nia, I will give you a real reason to be one. I have the personal cell phone number of the chief of police in this city. He sits in the front pew of our church every single Sunday. If you do not confess to your grandmother that this is a manic delusion right now, I am calling him." He stepped even closer, his presence overwhelmingly oppressive. I am going to tell the chief that my estranged, mentally unstable daughter broke into our home during a holiday dinner. I am going to tell him you are having a violent schizophrenic break, that you are threatening your sister, and that you are an immediate danger to yourself and others. Chloe leaned in from my left, her voice a cruel, taunting whisper near my ear. They will believe him, Nia. Look at you. Look at your dirty clothes. Look at the bags under your eyes. You look exactly like a homeless, crazy person. Who do you think the police will listen to, a respected retired executive and his wealthy son-in-law, or a ragged dropout who sleeps in a Honda Civic? My mother stepped in from the right, completing the suffocating circle around me. We still have your old medical files, Nia. We have the clinical depression diagnosis from college. It takes one phone call, just one, and they will drag you out of here in handcuffs. They will put you on an involuntary 72-hour psychiatric hold. We will have you committed to the state hospital. And once you are locked inside a padded room, who is going to check your little computer logs? Who is going to care about a stolen house when the person claiming it was stolen is heavily medicated in a psychiatric ward? The sheer calculated evil of their threat sent a shockwave of ice-cold horror straight down my spine. They were not just threatening to kick me out. They were threatening to legally strip away my freedom, my autonomy, and my voice. They were ready to use the police and the mental health system as weapons to silence me permanently. They knew their social standing, their church connections, and their polished, affluent facade would easily overpower the frantic claims of a disheveled woman who had been living in her car. They were cornering me, squeezing the life out of my resistance. My father held his phone up, his thumb hovering deliberately over the screen. "This is the end of the line," Nia Marcus said, his voice echoing with absolute finality. "You are going to confess to your grandmother that you are sick. You are going to admit that you signed that paper. If you do, I will let you walk out that front door and we will never speak again. If you refuse, I make the call, and you spend Thanksgiving night strapped to a hospital bed. Choose." I stood entirely trapped in their triangle of intimidation. The air in the room was completely stagnant. Todd stood just behind my father, a coward hiding behind the patriarch, but a victorious smirk was slowly returning to his face. He believed he had won. He believed that the threat of a psychiatric ward would finally break me, that the sheer terror of being locked away and drugged would force me to submit to their narrative. Grandma Josephine watched this horrifying display of parental abuse in absolute silence. Her face gave away nothing. She did not intervene to stop my father from threatening me with institutionalization. She simply observed, her dark eyes calculating, weighing the polished, aggressive certainty of my parents against my isolated, exhausted defiance. The pressure was unbearable. Every instinct of self-preservation screamed at me to surrender, to say whatever they wanted to hear, just so I could walk out of this house and escape the nightmare. I could feel the physical exhaustion pulling at my muscles. I could feel the bitter, agonizing reality that my parents were willing to destroy my entire life just to protect a fraudulent real estate deal and Chloe's fake luxury lifestyle. They were monsters hiding behind designer clothes and church donations. My father's thumb tapped the screen of his phone, unlocking it. He pulled up his contacts, his eyes never leaving mine. 10 seconds, Nia, he warned, his voice a lethal instrument of control. 10 seconds before I dial. Admit you are sick. Admit you signed the house over. Save yourself the humiliation of being dragged out of here in a straitjacket. 5 seconds passed. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked loudly, each strike of the pendulum sounding like a countdown to my absolute destruction. Chloe smiled maliciously. My mother crossed her arms, her chin raised in arrogant triumph. They were waiting for me to break. They were waiting for the tears, the apologies, the desperate surrender that had defined my entire childhood. 10 seconds. The grandfather clock struck the final chord of its chime, the heavy brass sound vibrating through the floorboards. I did not drop to my knees. I did not beg. I did not let a single tear touch my face. Instead, a slow, terrifyingly calm smile spread across my lips. It was not a smile of surrender. It was the smile of a woman who had just watched her enemies lock themselves inside a burning building. "Call him," I whispered, my voice completely devoid of fear. Marcus hesitated. His thumb remained frozen over the screen of his phone. He had expected begging. He had expected the broken, anxious college student he had kicked out 5 years ago to collapse under the pressure. He did not know how to process absolute, unyielding defiance. I said, "Call him Marcus." I repeated, my voice growing stronger, slicing through the heavy air of the dining room. "Call the chief of police. Tell him to send a squad car. Tell him to bring the paramedics with the straitjacket. Because I promise you, by the time they get here, the only people leaving this mansion in handcuffs will be the two people standing on my left." I did not wait for his response. I slowly reached down to the floor where I had dropped my battered canvas backpack at the beginning of the dinner. My mother let out a sharp, victorious scoff, clearly assuming I was reaching for my coat or my car keys to make a humiliated exit. Chloe crossed her arms tighter, her smirk widening as she prepared to watch me flee into the cold night. But I did not pull out my car keys. I reached deep into the padded compartment of the backpack and withdrew a heavy matte black military-grade laptop. It was thick, encased in a rugged shockproof shell, and completely devoid of any commercial logos. It was not the kind of machine you buy at a big-box electronics store. It was a machine built for digital warfare. If anyone had been watching from just over my shoulder, they would have seen the precise second the power dynamic in the room permanently inverted. I lifted the heavy device and placed it squarely on the mahogany table right next to my phone and Mr. Desmond's legal documents. I flipped the heavy lid open. The screen did not wake up with a cheerful chime or a standard colorful background. It booted into a stark black command line interface, lines of encrypted white text scrolling down the screen at lightning speed. I placed my thumb on the biometric scanner built into the reinforced casing. A green light flashed, confirming my identity, and the heavily encrypted drives unlocked with a mechanical click. I looked up from the glowing screen and locked eyes with my mother. "You have spent the last 5 years telling your country club friends and your church congregation that I am a glorified computer repairman," I said, my voice echoing with icy authority. "You told Chloe that I fix broken laptops at a strip mall. You told Grandma Josephine that I was a failed tech entrepreneur, burning through my imaginary savings." I slowly shook my head, my eyes burning into Vivian's terrified face. "I am not a computer mechanic, Vivian. I am a senior cybersecurity forensic analyst. I specialize in digital asset recovery, financial footprint tracking, and encrypted data extraction. For the past 3 years, I have worked as a highly classified independent contractor for the federal government. I tracked down offshore accounts for the Department of Justice. I dismantle digital fraud rings. I hunt people who steal millions of dollars and think they can hide behind fake IP addresses and shell companies." The room went completely devastatingly silent. The kind of silence that rings in your ears. The kind of silence that happens right after a bomb has been dropped, but right before the shockwave hits. My father slowly lowered his phone. The threat of calling the police evaporated from his mind, replaced by a sudden, creeping realization that he had drastically underestimated the opponent standing in his dining room. His eyes darted to the thick, rugged laptop, then back to my face. The sheer confidence radiating from me was something he could no longer dismiss as a manic delusion. Todd was practically turning gray. As a commercial real estate broker, he knew exactly what the words forensic analyst and federal contractor meant. He knew that the digital world was not just magic and fairy dust. It was a landscape of permanent records, unalterable server logs, and undeniable proof. The arrogant smirk had completely melted off his face, leaving behind the hollow, wide-eyed stare of a man who realized his entire life was about to be dismantled bite by bite. "You see, Todd," I continued, turning my attention entirely to my brother-in-law. "When you steal someone's identity, you leave a trail. When you forge a signature on a general power of attorney to transfer a $1.2 million property into a fake family trust, you leave an even bigger trail. You thought you were being clever by routing the signature through your home network. You thought that because I was estranged from the family and struggling to make ends meet, I would never have the resources or the knowledge to uncover what you did." I typed a rapid sequence of commands into the terminal. A series of windows popped open on the screen displaying high-resolution graphs, internet service provider logs, and official bank routing numbers. The reflection of the scrolling data danced across Todd's horrified eyes. "But you picked the wrong victim," I stated, my voice ringing with lethal precision. "You picked a woman who spends 60 hours a week unearthing the digital secrets of international criminals. Did you really think a sloppy amateur real estate fraud scheme orchestrated by a desperate broker and a spoiled social media influencer was going to slip past me?" Chloe let out a strangled, pathetic gasp. She grabbed the edge of the table, looking like she was about to collapse. She looked at our mother for help, but Vivian was entirely paralyzed. The grand matriarch of the Harrison family was staring at my laptop screen as if it were a loaded gun pointed directly at her chest. "You are bluffing," my father managed to say, though his voice was entirely stripped of its former volume. It was a weak, desperate croak. "You do not work for the government. You are making this up to scare us." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a heavy metal identification badge attached to a federal lanyard. I tossed it onto the table. It landed with a sharp clatter right next to Mr. Desmond's blue legal folder. The badge clearly displayed my photograph, my full legal name, and the unmistakable seal of a federal cybersecurity task force, complete with a high-level security clearance indicator. Mr. Desmond leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. He looked at the federal badge, then looked up at me, a profound glimmer of respect flashing across his stern features. He did not say a word, but the slight nod he gave me confirmed everything. He knew exactly what kind of firepower I had just brought to this fight. I looked at Grandma Josephine. The skepticism that had clouded her dark eyes just moments ago vanished entirely. It was replaced by a sharp, gleaming pride. She sat back in her chair, folding her hands neatly in her lap, watching me systematically dismantle the abusers she had mistakenly trusted. "I do not bluff, Marcus," I said, staring my father down until he was forced to look away. "I build cases, I gather evidence, I secure warrants. And for the past 90 days, while you all thought I was just some pathetic, homeless failure wandering the streets of Atlanta, I have been building the most comprehensive, airtight federal fraud case this family has ever seen." The oppressive, terrifying dominance my parents had held over me for my entire life shattered into a million irreparable pieces. They were no longer the powerful, untouchable figures of my childhood. They were cornered suspects facing a federal investigator. And I was just getting started. I turned back to my heavy forensic laptop. My fingers flew across the rugged mechanical keyboard. The loud clacking of the keys echoed like a metronome in the dead silence of the dining room. I bypassed the standard operating system entirely and opened a secure terminal window. Todd watched my hands, his chest rising and falling in shallow, rapid breaths. I could see the cold sweat forming on his forehead, catching the warm light from the crystal chandelier above us. I brought up the digital file of the General Power of Attorney, the exact same document Mr. Desmond had presented in physical form just moments ago. I did not bother looking at the dense legal jargon or the fraudulent signatures. Instead, I ran a rapid extraction script to strip the document down to its bare coding, pulling the raw metadata directly onto the high-resolution display. Lines of encrypted white text cascaded across the black background of my screen. I hit a key, freezing the code on a specific block of text, then magnified it so the font was large enough for everyone standing near the table to read clearly. "This is the metadata embedded directly inside your forged power of attorney," I announced, pointing to a string of numbers highlighted in bright, unforgiving green. A digital signature is not just a copied picture of a name. It is a highly complex cryptographic package. It permanently captures the exact time, the exact date, the operating system, the device type, and the precise Internet protocol address of the network where the signature was executed. I tapped the screen, tracing the long string of green numbers. This specific IP address belongs to a residential broadband router. Todd swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed convulsively. He looked like he desperately wanted to run, but his legs were practically glued to the hardwood floor. I opened a new window right next to the metadata log. I ran a traceroute program on the IP address, pinging the geolocation data in real time. A digital map of the greater Atlanta area materialized on the screen. A sharp red pin dropped onto the map, zooming in closer and closer, until it highlighted a very specific, very familiar, affluent suburban neighborhood. The red pin hovered directly over a street name. It zoomed in further, hovering directly over the precise coordinates of Todd and Chloe's expensive newly built house. The digital signature that signed away my million-dollar property was executed from the private Wi-Fi network inside your living room, Todd. I stated, my voice echoing with undeniable, absolute finality. It was not signed at a lawyer's office downtown. It was not signed at a public library. It was signed on your personal home network. Chloe let out a sharp, genuine gasp. She pulled her hands away from Todd as if his suit jacket had suddenly caught fire. She looked at the glowing map on my screen, then back at her husband, her eyes wide with mounting terror. Todd tried to speak, but his voice cracked horribly. He cleared his throat, desperately searching for a lifeline in a sea of hard data. "That does not prove anything," he stammered, his eyes darting frantically around the room, begging my parents for support. "I told you all what happened. You came to our house, Nia. You stayed in our guest room. You used our Wi-Fi to sign the document. That perfectly explains the IP address matching our router. You were sitting right there at our kitchen table when you finalized the transfer." I smiled. It was a cold, calculated predator's smile. I had been waiting for him to double down on that exact specific lie. I hit another key combination. A third window snapped open on the laptop screen, perfectly splitting the large display into three undeniable pieces of damning evidence. On the left was the raw metadata highlighting his home IP address. In the center was the geolocation map pointing directly to his roof. On the right, I loaded a secure folder containing a series of official timestamped PDF documents. I opened the first document in the folder. It was a Delta Airlines boarding pass bearing my full legal name. The forged signature on this power of attorney was executed on October 14th at 2:15 in the afternoon Eastern Standard Time, I said, reading the exact timestamp aloud from the metadata log. But according to this airline manifest, on October 13th, I boarded a direct flight from Atlanta to Seattle, Washington. I opened the next document. It was a detailed folio receipt from the Marriott Hotel in downtown Seattle. I checked into my hotel room at 8 o'clock that night on the West Coast. I continued, my voice steady and relentless. I swiped my personal credit card at the front desk. I ordered room service on the 14th at 1 in the afternoon. And at 2:15, the exact minute you claim I was sitting in your kitchen in Atlanta signing my life away, I was actually sitting in a secure, windowless conference room at a federal building in Seattle. I opened a final document and expanded it across the screen. It was an official visitor log from the federal agency. It showed my signature, my badge scan, and the exact times of my entry and exit verified by armed security personnel. I was 3,000 miles away, Todd. I have the commercial airline records. I have the hotel security footage showing me walking through the lobby to buy a coffee. I have the sworn testimony of federal agents who were sitting across a conference table from me while my digital signature was miraculously being forged on your home Wi-Fi network. The trap snapped completely shut. The solid walls of mathematics, digital forensics, and federal visitor logs boxed Todd in from every conceivable angle. He could not claim I was crazy. He could not claim I simply forgot. He could not claim I was physically present at his house. IP addresses and federal security checkpoints do not lie, and they certainly do not suffer from manic depressive episodes. My mother let out a low, agonizing moan. She slumped back into her heavy dining chair, her hands trembling violently in her lap. The crushing reality of the situation had finally pierced through her carefully constructed delusion. She realized that she had not just participated in a nasty family dispute, she had actively conspired to commit wire fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny, and her estranged daughter had the entire federal paper trail saved on a shock-proof hard drive to prove it. "You used my social security number to buy designer shoes and fund your luxury vacations," I said, turning my gaze to my mother and Chloe, watching them wither under my stare. But Todd took it a step further. Todd used my digital identity to steal a $1.2 million asset across state lines. That elevates this entire situation from simple, pathetic family identity theft to grand larceny and federal wire fraud. Mr. Desmond adjusted his tailored suit jacket, his expression completely stony and professional. The forensic evidence presented here is entirely conclusive, he stated, his deep voice confirming the terrifying legal reality of my digital presentation. The trust transfer is fundamentally fraudulent, the power of attorney is null and void, and the individuals responsible for executing this forgery are currently facing severe, unavoidable criminal liability. Todd physically backed away from the dining table. His chest heaved as genuine suffocating panic fully consumed him. He looked at Chloe, hoping for the blind loyalty she had always offered, but she was actively shrinking away from him. Chloe pressed herself against the wall of the dining room as if trying to merge with the expensive wallpaper. She was already calculating how to save herself, calculating how quickly she could throw her husband to the wolves to protect her own skin and her pristine social media image. Grandma Josephine stood up. She did not lean on the table for support. She stood tall, her posture radiating absolute uncompromising power. She looked at Todd, then at my mother, and finally at my father, who was staring at the floor in total defeat. "You disgusting, pathetic parasites," Grandma Josephine said, her voice laced with absolute disgust. "You thought you could prey on this girl because you convinced yourselves she was weak. You thought you could steal my money and destroy her future because you started believing your own lies." She turned to me. Her dark eyes softened just for a fraction of a second, revealing a profound depth of respect and immense pride. "Finish them, Nia," my grandmother commanded. I turned my attention back to the rugged matte black laptop. My fingers hovered over the mechanical keyboard for a fraction of a second before descending. The sharp, rapid clacking of the keys filled the dining room, echoing off the crystal and china that had been set for a Thanksgiving feast we would never eat. I did not look at my parents. I looked directly at Mr. Desmond, maintaining the professional, clinical detachment of a forensic auditor presenting findings to a federal prosecutor. "Mr. Desmond," I said, my voice projecting clearly across the table, "I want to be absolutely precise about the legal terminology we are dealing with here tonight. My sister and my mother have spent the last hour desperately trying to frame this as a misunderstanding over family asset management. They want to characterize this as a domestic dispute regarding a daughter they claim is mentally unfit." I hit the enter key with a sharp crack. A new display cascaded across the monitor, showing a web of financial routing numbers intersecting with the forged property transfer. "But you and I both know that family asset management does not involve routing a fraudulent digital signature through an encrypted virtual private network in an attempt to mask an IP address," I continued. "What Todd and Chloe executed was not a protective measure. It constitutes aggravated identity theft and wire fraud." Mr. Desmond adjusted his posture, his hands resting firmly on his leather briefcase. "Both of which are serious federal felonies," he noted, his deep voice cementing the gravity of my statement. "Exactly," I said, turning my gaze to lock onto Todd. Todd was sweating profusely now. The expensive fabric of his tailored shirt was clinging to his chest. "When you executed that electronic signature, Todd, you used an internet service provider to transmit fraudulent legal documents across state lines to a digital registry. The moment that data packet left your router in Atlanta and hit a server to alter the deed of a property located in Savannah, you triggered Title 18 of the United States Code Section 1343. Wire fraud." Todd opened his mouth, but only a dry, rasping sound came out. He swallowed heavily, his eyes darting toward the exits as if calculating whether he could physically outrun the digital evidence glowing on my screen. "And because you used my specific personal identifying information, my name, my date of birth, and my social security number during the commission of that felony, you tacked on aggravated identity theft," I added, stepping around the table to close the distance between us. "That carries a mandatory consecutive prison sentence. You do not just get a fine for this, Todd, you get a federal inmate number." My fingers struck the keys again in a relentless, punishing rhythm. Each line of code I executed pulled another layer of their deception into the light. I brought up the banking ledger connecting the Harrison Family Trust to the fraudulent credit accounts. I showed the exact digital pathway where Todd had attempted to secure a massive line of credit using the Savannah property as collateral. He had been planning to borrow against my house to pay off his own failing commercial investments. You were not just holding the property to protect me, I told Todd, my eyes locked on the screen as the financial web fully materialized. You were actively attempting to drain its equity. I have the loan applications right here. You applied for a commercial equity line of $600,000 just 3 weeks ago. You forged my signature on the asset declaration forms for a federally insured bank. That adds bank fraud to your rapidly growing list of felony charges. Todd's knees actually buckled. He grabbed the edge of the dining table to keep himself from collapsing onto the hardwood floor. He was physically shaking his breath, coming in short, erratic gasps. The polished, arrogant, white-collar criminal had been completely stripped bare, leaving nothing but a terrified coward facing decades behind bars. Chloe let out a sharp, breathless whimper. Todd, do something, she pleaded, tugging desperately at his sleeve. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them we will give the house back. We can just sign it back over to her right now. You cannot simply undo a federal crime by handing back the stolen property after you get caught, Mr. Desmond interjected coldly, shutting down Chloe's naive attempt at a quick fix. The crime is the act of the forgery and the transmission of the fraud. The deed transfer is already recorded in the county database. The paper trail is permanent. I nodded in agreement, pointing to the financial documents scattered on the table. Furthermore, as a licensed commercial real estate broker, Todd, you are bound by strict fiduciary duties and ethical regulations. The moment the State Real Estate Commission sees the metadata linking your home IP address to a forged power of attorney, your broker's license will be permanently revoked. Your career is completely over. No reputable firm will ever hire you, and no bank will ever approve your commercial loans again. The reality of the situation crashed down on Todd with the force of a concrete block. His entire identity, his wealth, his status, and his arrogant superiority were all tied to his real estate career. Without his license, he was nothing. He was just a criminal facing a federal indictment. It was not my idea, Todd blurted out, his voice cracking into a high-pitched whine. The loyalty he had shown his wife just 10 minutes ago vanished instantly in the face of federal prison. He pointed a shaking finger at my mother. It was Vivian. Vivian orchestrated the entire thing. Todd, Chloe shrieked, staring at her husband in absolute horror. How could you say that? It is the truth, Todd yelled, his survival instincts completely overriding his polished facade. He backed away from Chloe, raising his hands defensively. Vivian came to us. She told us Nia was missing and that the Savannah property was sitting empty. She said the taxes were going to default and the state would seize it. She brought us the power of attorney forms. She told me Nia had verbally agreed to it months ago, but was too unstable to sign the paperwork in person. You lying coward! My mother hissed, her face contorting with rage. You are the real estate expert. You are the one who set up the shell company. You are the one who told Chloe how to bypass the notary requirements using a digital portal. Do not you dare try to pin this on me. I only did it because you told me the property would stay in the family. Todd fired back, his voice pitching up an octave. You said we could leverage the equity to cover Chloe's debts. You told me it was a victimless crime because Nia was never going to use the house anyway. I stood silently and watched the majestic, unified front of the Harrison family violently implode. They were turning on each other like starving animals. The moment the threat of real, tangible consequences entered the room, their loyalty evaporated. There was no family bond here. There was only shared greed, and now shared terror. It does not matter whose idea it was, I said, my voice cutting through their screaming match. You all participated, you all benefited, and you are all complicit. I walked back to my laptop and pulled up a different set of financial logs. And speaking of Chloe's debts, let us not forget the other federal crime sitting on the table. The identity theft did not start with the house. It started with the credit cards. Chloe stopped screaming at her husband and froze. While I was living in my car fighting to clear my name with the credit bureaus, I managed to subpoena the shipping logs for the fraudulent purchases, I explained, scrolling through a list of high-end retailers on my screen. I found out exactly where those designer handbags, the luxury cosmetics, and the expensive shoes were being delivered. Every single package purchased with my stolen social security number was shipped directly to this mansion and signed for by Vivian Harrison. My mother gripped the back of a dining chair, her knuckles stark white. She was hyperventilating, her eyes darting toward the front door as if calculating an escape route. "You maxed out 5 credit cards in my name to maintain your daughter's illusion of wealth," I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. "You destroyed my credit score so Chloe could impress a real estate broker who turned out to be just as financially desperate and morally bankrupt as the two of you." Mr. Desmond closed his briefcase with a loud final snap. "Miss Harrison, given the magnitude of the digital evidence you have secured, I advise that we immediately hand these findings over to the authorities. This is no longer a matter for civil litigation regarding a property dispute. This is a comprehensive criminal conspiracy." "Please," my father whispered. It was the first time Marcus had spoken since I revealed my federal badge. His booming, authoritative voice was entirely gone. He looked like a hollow, defeated old man. "Nia, please. If you take this to the authorities, they will send your mother to prison. They will send your sister to prison. You will destroy this family." "This family destroyed itself," I replied, refusing to show him even an ounce of sympathy. "You made your choices when you decided my life was an acceptable sacrifice for your comfort. You made your choices when you threatened to lock me in a psychiatric ward just 20 minutes ago. I am not destroying you, Marcus. I am just holding the mirror up." I turned away from my father. He had nothing left to offer this conversation. My gaze shifted and locked directly onto my mother. Vivian sat rigid in her high-backed dining chair, but the polished armor she wore so well was visibly disintegrating. The immaculate, powerful mega-church events director was physically shrinking right before my eyes. Her carefully styled hair suddenly seemed brittle. Her perfect posture collapsed, her shoulders slumping forward, as if an invisible crushing weight was pressing down on her spine. I stepped back to my forensic laptop. My fingers flew across the keyboard one more time. I minimized the real estate fraud documents and opened a secure directory labeled Financial Diagnostics. A massive high-resolution spreadsheet populated the screen, color coded with blinding red alerts. "Let us talk about the 5 premium black credit cards," I stated, my voice slicing through the heavy, stagnant air of the dining room. "Let us talk about the exact reason why I have been sleeping in the back seat of a Honda Civic for the past 90 days, while my family dined on catered turkey and expensive wine." Vivian let out a strangled, pathetic gasp. She reached out her trembling hand, knocking over her crystal water glass, but she did not even notice the spill soaking into the expensive table runner. I turned the laptop slightly so Grandma Josephine could see the blinding red numbers. 3 months ago, I was preparing to secure a commercial lease for my new cybersecurity firm. I explained, keeping my tone strictly clinical. I went to the bank to finalize the paperwork. Instead of an approval, I was pulled into a private office and told that my credit score had plummeted by over 300 points. I was told that I had over $250,000 in unsecured revolving debt. My legitimate bank accounts were frozen pending fraud investigations. I lost my apartment lease. I lost my savings. I was thrown onto the street overnight. I pointed a sharp finger at my mother. Because Vivian Harrison, a woman who preaches about grace and integrity every Sunday morning, took my social security number and used it to open 5 top-tier luxury credit accounts. You bypassed the security questions because you are my mother. You knew the name of my first pet. You knew the street I grew up on. You routed the physical cards to a private post office box across town, and then you and Chloe went on a spending spree that would make a cartel boss blush. "That is not true," Vivian whimpered, shaking her head frantically, though her eyes remained glued to the floor. "We were going to pay it back. It was just a temporary bridge loan." "A bridge loan." I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound that echoed off the dining room walls. "You maxed out $250,000 in 90 days. You did not buy groceries. You bought Jimmy Choo bags. You bought first-class tickets to the Bahamas for Chloe's anniversary trip. But the designer clothes were just a distraction, were they not? The vast majority of that stolen money did not go to retail boutiques. It went directly into a failing shell company. I hit the spacebar, displaying a complex flowchart connecting the fraudulent credit accounts to a series of wire transfers. Todd's commercial real estate investment fund has been operating at a massive loss for over a year. I revealed, watching Todd flinch, as if I had physically struck him. He lost his primary investors last spring. He was facing margin calls he could not cover. His entire image as a successful, wealthy broker was a complete fabrication. He was bankrupt, and Chloe could not handle the idea of losing her status as a wealthy socialite. I walked slowly around the edge of the table, closing the distance until I was standing right behind my mother's chair. She shrank away from me, her breath hitching in panic. "You could not handle it either, Vivian," I said, leaning down so my voice was right next to her ear. How could the legendary Vivian Harrison walk into church and admit that her golden child married a broke fraudster? How could you face the country club knowing your perfect son-in-law was about to be foreclosed on? You could not. Your ego simply would not allow it. So you decided to sacrifice your other daughter. You decided my life was an acceptable price to pay to keep Todd's failing fund afloat and Chloe's fake affluent lifestyle intact. I stood up straight, projecting my voice so every single person in the room felt the full weight of her betrayal. You funneled cash advances from my stolen credit cards directly into Todd's business accounts to artificially inflate his balance sheets. You kept the illusion of black excellence alive while actively destroying your own flesh and blood. You knew I was on the streets. You knew I had lost everything. And yet you sat here tonight, wearing a designer dress paid for with my stolen credit, eating expensive food, and had the absolute audacity to call me a lazy, homeless failure to my face. Vivian finally broke. She buried her face in her hands and began to weep loud, wretched, theatrical sobs that shook her entire body. She tried to reach out for Grandma Josephine, her hand waving blindly in the air. "Mother, please," Vivian wailed, her voice thick with panic and shame. "We were desperate. Todd promised he would close a massive commercial deal by September. He promised the commission would be enough to pay off all the cards before Nia ever found out. We were just trying to survive a bad quarter. We never meant to hurt her. We just needed time." Grandma Josephine did not reach back. She sat perfectly still, staring at her daughter with an expression of such profound, chilling disgust that Vivian slowly lowered her hand, utterly defeated. "You let your own child sleep in a car," Grandma Josephine said, her voice barely above a whisper, yet it cut through the room sharper than any shout. "You stole her identity, ruined her financial future, and sat at my Thanksgiving table judging her for the poverty you manufactured. You are no daughter of mine." The absolute finality of Grandma Josephine's words struck Vivian like an executioner's blade. The matriarch had spoken. There would be no forgiveness. There would be no redemption. The Harrison family name, the church reputation, the country club status, it was all reduced to ash. Chloe tried to scramble away from the table, distancing herself from Todd and Vivian, looking for any possible exit strategy. But I was not finished. "Do you know what it feels like to wake up at 3 in the morning because the temperature dropped below freezing, and the only thing keeping you warm is a thin jacket?" I asked, turning my focus back to my sister. "Do you know the sheer blinding panic of checking your bank account and seeing a negative balance, knowing you cannot even afford a bottle of water? While you were posting photos from luxury resorts pretending to be a self-made millionaire, I was brushing my teeth in a gas station bathroom, terrified that a police officer would knock on my window and arrest me for loitering." Chloe squeezed her eyes shut, crying silently, completely stripped of her arrogant armor. "You stole my peace. You stole my security," I continued relentlessly. "But you made one fatal miscalculation. You thought pushing me to the absolute edge would break me. You thought homelessness would force me to come crawling back to this toxic family begging for scraps. You thought I would be so desperate for a warm bed that I would sign away that Savannah property just to survive." I walked back to my laptop and closed the lid with a definitive heavy snap. "But stripping away everything I had did not break me," I stated, staring down the 3 people who had conspired to ruin my life. "It liberated me. It taught me exactly how to survive without a single ounce of your toxic conditional love. It forced me to pour every waking hour into building my cybersecurity firm until it became a lucrative federal contracting powerhouse. You tried to bury me under $250,000 of fraudulent debt, but you only succeeded in creating the very expert who is going to send you to federal prison. Mr. Desmond picked up his briefcase. The presentation of evidence was complete. The prosecution had rested its case right here in the dining room. He looked at me, a silent confirmation passing between us. The trap had been flawlessly executed, and the predators were now permanently caged by their own greed. Grandma Josephine did not blink. The crushing weight of the federal crimes hanging over the dining room had not distracted her from the original burning question that had started this entire confrontation. She slowly turned her head, her gaze sweeping past my hyperventilating mother, past my terrified sister, and past my ruined brother-in-law. Her eyes locked directly onto me. "If you did not sign that paper," Grandma Josephine said, her voice a low, terrifying rumble that commanded absolute silence, "then who exactly are the elderly couple living in your house?" I did not answer her immediately. I did not need to. I turned back to my laptop, the rugged black casing gleaming under the dining room chandelier. My fingers danced across the keyboard, executing a final string of commands. The screen shifted, clearing the encrypted financial logs and replacing them with a split display. On the left side of the screen, I pulled up a certified PDF of the residential lease agreement filed with the Savannah Property Management Company. On the right side, I pulled up the official Georgia state driver's license photos of the individuals listed on that lease. I hit the spacebar, broadcasting the images directly onto the center of the display. The high-resolution photos filled the screen. An older white man with thinning gray hair and a perpetual scowl, and an older white woman with heavily applied makeup and a tight, disapproving smile. Chloe let out a strangled, horrified gasp. She threw her hands over her mouth, her eyes bulging as she stared at the screen. Todd physically recoiled from the table, his face turning an impossible shade of gray. He looked like he was about to violently vomit onto the expensive hardwood floor. I turned the laptop so that Grandma Josephine and Mr. Desmond had a clear, unobstructed view of the driver's license photos. "Allow me to introduce the current rent-free occupants of the Savannah estate," I announced, my voice slicing through the heavy, stagnant air of the dining room. "Meet Arthur and Martha Miller, Todd's parents." The silence that followed was so profound, so absolutely devastating, that I could hear the sharp intake of breath from my father standing 10 feet away. Grandma Josephine stared at the photos on the screen. Her dark eyes narrowed, burning with a cold, terrifying fury. She looked from the laptop to Todd, then to Vivian. "Your parents?" Grandma Josephine said, her voice dangerously quiet. "You put your parents in my granddaughter's house." I did not let Todd answer. I stepped around the table, positioning myself right behind his chair. "He did not just put them in the house, Grandma," I said, leaning down so my voice carried clearly to every corner of the room. "He gave them a permanent rent-free lease subsidized entirely by the Harrison Family Trust. A trust that my mother funded using my stolen credit cards. My mother bankrupted me so she could provide a luxury retirement home for the very people who consider our family beneath them." Vivian let out a sharp, panicked sob. "Nia, please," she begged, her hands shaking violently. "It is not what you think. We were just trying to help them out for a few months. They lost their pension. They had nowhere to go." I spun around to face my mother, my anger finally breaking through my clinical detachment. "They had nowhere to go," I shouted, the raw, furious emotion finally exploding. "I had nowhere to go. Vivian, I was sleeping in a freezing car behind a grocery store. I was washing my face with cold water in a public restroom, while your son-in-law's parents were sleeping in a $1 million mansion that belonged to me." I slammed my hand onto the mahogany table. "And do not try to play the sympathetic Christian savior," I continued, my voice echoing off the walls. "I know exactly who Arthur and Martha Miller are. I know exactly what they think of this family." I turned back to my laptop and minimized the driver's license photos. I opened a new file, an audio recording I had extracted from a country club security server during a separate investigation. I hit play. The audio was slightly muffled, but the voices were unmistakable. It was Todd's father, Arthur Miller, speaking clearly over the clinking of golf clubs and polite applause. It is embarrassing, really, Arthur's voice echoed through the dining room. Todd marrying into that family. They throw money around like they won the lottery, but you can dress them up in designer clothes all you want. They are still just loud, uncultured people trying to buy their way into the right neighborhoods. Vivian is practically begging us to accept them. It is pathetic. I paused the recording. My mother stared at the floor, her face burning with a horrific, suffocating shame. My father looked away, unable to meet the eyes of the billionaire matriarch sitting at the table. They laughed at you, Vivian, I said, my voice dropping to a harsh, unforgiving whisper. They mocked you at their exclusive country club. They called you pathetic. They called your family loud and uncultured. And your response to that blatant racist humiliation was to steal your own daughter's identity, destroy her life, and hand them $1 million mansion on a silver platter just so you could keep up the illusion that you were accepted by high society. Grandma Josephine slowly stood up. The sheer, overwhelming power of her presence commanded the entire room. She looked at Vivian, her eyes filled with an absolute terrifying disgust. You sold your own child? Grandma Josephine said, her voice trembling with fury. You traded your daughter's future, her security, and her sanity, all to buy the approval of people who despise you. You are a disgrace to this family. You are a disgrace to everything I built. Vivian collapsed forward, burying her face in her arms on the table, sobbing hysterically. She had nothing left. The polished, perfect facade of the mega-church events director was entirely shattered. The elegant, powerful matriarch of the Atlanta social scene had been reduced to a weeping, fraudulent criminal. Todd remained frozen in his chair, completely trapped by the consequences of his own arrogance. He had believed he was untouchable. He had believed he could manipulate a grieving, struggling woman and outsmart a wealthy, established family. He had believed he was the smartest person in the room. But as he stared at the federal badge resting next to the digital evidence on the table, he finally understood the terrifying reality of his situation. He had picked a fight with a ghost, and the ghost had returned as an executioner. I stepped away from Todd, letting his pathetic, ruined state speak for itself, and turned my eyes to the head of the table. My father, Marcus, the great patriarch, who just 20 minutes ago threatened to have me thrown in a psychiatric ward, was utterly broken. A slow, punishing stillness settled over the room as I watched his hands. Those massive, imposing hands that had gripped the edge of the table with such terrifying authority were now resting flat against the mahogany, shaking so violently that his heavy gold wedding band clacked against the wood. He could not stop the tremors. The physical manifestation of his guilt was completely overriding his mind. You knew, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly quiet register that forced everyone in the room to lean in just to hear me. You knew everything, Marcus. Vivian might have been the architect of the fraud, but you were the silent partner who signed off on the blueprints. My father could not even look up. He stared at his trembling hands, his chest rising and falling in shallow, panicked breaths. Let us talk about the arrangement. I continued pacing slowly behind my parents' chairs like a prosecutor delivering a closing argument. Let us talk about the exact price tag you put on your own flesh and blood. Todd's commercial real estate fund was collapsing. He was entirely bankrupt. And when his parents Arthur and Martha lost their pension and their condo, Todd came crying to you and Vivian. He threatened to file for bankruptcy publicly. He threatened to humiliate Chloe, to strip away her fake influencer wealth, and to expose this family to the ultimate scandal at the megachurch. A broken marriage to a broke, fraudulent broker. Vivian let out a strangled, pathetic wail, pressing her face against the table, but I did not stop. You could not handle the country club gossip, I stated, aiming the words directly at the back of my mother's head. You could not stomach the idea of the congregation whispering about Chloe's failed marriage. So you made a deal with the devil. Todd agreed to keep up the charade. He agreed to keep smiling in the family Christmas photos and playing the part of the highly successful commercial broker. And in exchange, you gave him the ultimate bribe. You handed him my social security number to keep his business afloat, and you handed his racist parents the keys to $1 million estate in Savannah. My father finally squeezed his eyes shut, a single tear escaping and tracking down his weathered face. It was not a tear of remorse for me. It was a tear of absolute catastrophic shame because his mother, Grandma Josephine, was watching his entire legacy disintegrate. "You sold me," I said, striking the back of my father's chair with my hand, making him flinch. "You literally sold your own daughter to subsidize the retirement of two elderly white people who openly despise you. You paid them off with my property so they would not expose your fake, pathetic high society facade." Grandma Josephine leaned forward, her dark eyes narrowing into dangerous slits as she stared at her son. "Is this true, Marcus?" she demanded, her voice vibrating with a primal maternal rage. "Did you actively conspire to put those people in your daughter's home?" Marcus opened his mouth, but his vocal cords completely failed him. He tried to speak, but only a dry, rasping gasp escaped. He looked at his mother, his face twisting in a grotesque mask of pure cowardice, and then gave a single microscopic nod. A sound of pure, unadulterated disgust escaped Grandma Josephine's lips. She looked at him as if he were a rotting corpse that had just been dumped onto her dining table. "You threw your own child onto the winter streets," I continued, refusing to let the heavy silence rescue them. "You knew I was sleeping in a Honda Civic. I called you Marcus. 2 months ago, when the first frost hit Atlanta, I called you from a gas station payphone because my cell service had been shut off. I begged you for a loan just to get a motel room for the weekend. Do you remember what you told me?" My father squeezed his eyes shut again, shaking his head frantically as if he could physically block out the memory of his own words. "You told me that independence was a harsh teacher," I recited, perfectly mirroring the cold, detached tone he had used that night. "You told me that coming home was not an option until I apologized to Chloe for being a failure and admitted that my tech career was a mistake. You let me freeze in a parking lot. You let me wash my hair in public sinks with freezing tap water. You let me ration a single loaf of bread for 5 days. And then you sat down at this table tonight, ate a catered Thanksgiving turkey, and looked your mother in the eye, while you threatened to have me committed to a mental asylum." Chloe, who had been completely backed against the wall, suddenly slid to the floor. She curled her knees to her chest, rocking back and forth, weeping uncontrollably. She had finally realized that there was no coming back from this. The money was gone. The fake marriage was exposed. The golden child status was permanently revoked. She was going to federal prison, and her husband was going to be disbarred and incarcerated right alongside her. "You are monsters," Grandma Josephine stated, her voice slicing through the sounds of my mother and sister sobbing. She pushed her chair back from the table and stood to her full height. She did not look like an elderly woman. She looked like an absolute force of nature, a self-made billionaire who had clawed her way up from nothing, only to watch her offspring turn into the very parasites she despised. "I gave you everything," Marcus, Grandma Josephine said, stepping toward him. "I paid for your education. I funded your early business ventures. I built a legacy so that this family would never have to bow to anyone, and you took that legacy, weaponized it, and used it to enslave your own daughter. You prostituted your family's wealth to a white con artist just so your country club friends would not whisper about your daughter's divorce. You sicken me. You absolutely sicken me." Mr. Desmond stepped forward, snapping a fresh, crisp legal pad onto the table. The sharp sound made Todd jump in his seat. "The premeditated nature of this arrangement significantly elevates the criminal liability for all parties involved," Mr. Desmond noted, his voice carrying the terrifying weight of federal prosecution. "This was not a crime of sudden desperation. This was a calculated, sustained conspiracy to commit fraud, extortion, and grand larceny. The fact that Vivian and Marcus Harrison actively facilitated the transfer of the Savannah property to appease a blackmailer demonstrates a coordinated criminal enterprise. The federal prosecutors will not just look at Todd and Chloe. They will file RICO charges against this entire household." My mother let out a horrific guttural scream. She scrambled up from her chair and threw herself onto the floor at my feet, grabbing the hem of my jeans with her perfectly manicured hands. "Nia, please," Vivian wailed, her face completely ruined by tears and smeared expensive makeup. "We will give it all back. We will evict them tomorrow. We will pay off the credit cards. Just do not let him call the FBI. Please, I am your mother. You cannot send your mother to prison. You cannot do this to us. I looked down at the woman who had spent 32 years making me feel completely worthless. I looked at the hands clinging to my clothes, the same hands that had typed my social security number into fraudulent loan applications, the same hands that had poured expensive wine while I was starving in a parking lot. I slowly reached down and peeled her fingers off my jeans one by one. I stepped back, removing myself entirely from her grasp. I am not doing anything to you, Vivian, I said, my voice echoing with total, absolute closure. I am just handing the digital forensics to the authorities. You did this to yourself. You built a house of cards on top of my ruined life, and now you are going to sit in the rubble and face the consequences. I turned my back on her and walked over to my laptop. The screen was still glowing brightly, the federal evidence locked loaded and ready to be transmitted. I rested my hands on the edge of the mahogany table, looking out over the glowing screen of my forensic laptop. From this vantage point, I had a perfect, unobstructed view of the absolute carnage I had just orchestrated. The great Harrison family, the untouchable royalty of the Atlanta megachurch scene, was currently tearing itself to pieces right in front of me. The polished veneer had been entirely stripped away, leaving nothing but cornered animals fighting for survival. Chloe scrambled up from the hardwood floor, her designer dress wrinkled and stained with spilled wine. She pointed a trembling, accusatory finger directly at our mother. "You said it was foolproof," Chloe shrieked, her voice cracking under the weight of sheer panic. "You told me nobody would ever check the IP address. You promised me we would secure the commercial equity line, pay off Todd's offshore debts, and nobody would ever know. Now I am going to federal prison because of your stupid plan." Vivian recoiled as if she had been slapped. "Do not you dare raise your voice at me, you ungrateful little brat!" My mother spat back, her own fear manifesting as pure venom. "I committed a felony to save your pathetic marriage. I put my own neck on the line because you were crying in my kitchen every single night, terrified that your Instagram followers were going to find out your husband was a bankrupt fraud." Todd pushed himself off the wall, his face twisted in a mixture of terror and overwhelming resentment. He turned on Chloe, completely abandoning the protective husband act. "Do not try to pin this entirely on your mother, Chloe," Todd yelled, his voice echoing sharply across the dining room. "I was perfectly willing to declare corporate bankruptcy. I told you we needed to downsize. I told you we needed to sell this house and move into a condo. But you flat out refused. You could not stomach the idea of taking the phrase luxury real estate wife out of your social media bio. You screamed at me for hours, telling me I was a failure, telling me your mother was ashamed of me. I was protecting our family brand," Vivian shouted over him, stepping into the center of the room. "If the congregation found out that Chloe's husband was a broke, incompetent failure, we would be the laughingstock of the entire community. I am the events director. I sit on the executive board. I cannot have a daughter going through a public, humiliating bankruptcy while I am organizing the church charity gala." I let out a sharp, booming laugh that instantly silenced their pathetic, chaotic squabbling. I walked around the edge of the table, stepping deliberately into their circle, standing directly between them and the front door. "A family brand," I repeated, letting the absolute absurdity of the words roll off my tongue. That is what this entire orchestrated federal felony was about. A brand. I looked at my mother, then at my sister, feeling a profound, chilling clarity wash over my entire being. The puzzle pieces were finally locked into place. This was never just about money. It was about optics. It was about the toxic, hollow illusion they had sacrificed my life to maintain. "You wanted the aesthetics of Black excellence without doing a single drop of the actual work," I said, my voice projecting with lethal precision. "You wanted the magazine features, the VIP church pews, the designer wardrobes, and the country club nods. But you did not have the character, the competence, or the intelligence to actually build it. So you faked it. You built a paper castle out of stolen credit cards, identity theft, and a forged property deed." I turned my gaze directly onto my sister. Chloe shrank back, crossing her arms defensively over her chest. "You could not bear to lose your online followers." "Chloe," I stated, stripping away her final layer of dignity. "What would the thousands of strangers on the internet say if they found out your perfect wealthy white husband was actually drowning in margin calls? What would happen to your lucrative brand deals and your unboxing videos if you had to admit you were broke, so you made a disgusting transactional bargain? Todd promised to keep playing the part of the successful mogul to save your online image, and in return, you and Mom agreed to subsidize his massive failures using my blood and my future. I stepped closer to her, making sure she felt the full weight of my disgust. You traded your own sister for Instagram likes. You let me freeze in a car so you could post photos holding shopping bags that were paid for with my stolen social security number. You sold my safety just to keep playing dress up. Todd slumped against the wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor, burying his face in his hands. The polished, arrogant broker was entirely gone. Only a terrified, broken criminal remained. Chloe was openly weeping into her hands, completely ignored by the husband she had committed a felony to keep. I slowly turned my attention to my mother. Vivian was staring at me, her chest heaving desperately, searching for a way to regain the upper hand. "And you, Vivian," I said, my voice dropping to a low, unforgiving register. "You are the most sickening part of this entire transaction. You sold out your own flesh and blood for Sunday morning gossip. You could not walk into that megachurch and admit that your golden child had failed. You could not bear the thought of the other executive board members whispering behind their prayer hands. You decided that my life, my sanity, and my physical safety were an acceptable price to pay, so you could keep wearing those designer hats and bragging about your flawless family during the charity luncheons. Mother, you do not understand the pressure," Vivian pleaded, turning her frantic eyes toward Grandma Josephine, completely bypassing me in a desperate bid for sympathy. "You do not understand what it is like to maintain our status in this city. People are always waiting for us to fail. They are always waiting to tear successful Black families down. I was just trying to keep us on top. I was trying to protect our legacy." Grandma Josephine stepped forward, her wooden cane thumping heavily against the hardwood floor. The sound was like a judge striking a gavel. She looked at Vivian with eyes that had seen decades of real, grueling struggle. "I built my business during an era when the color of my skin meant I could not even walk through the front doors of the banks I was depositing my millions into." Grandma Josephine said, her voice radiating pure historical weight. "I scrubbed floors, I mixed cosmetics in a bathtub, and I fought tooth and nail to build generational wealth so that my descendants would never have to bow their heads to anyone. I gave you a legacy of absolute resilience." Grandma Josephine pointed a trembling but furious finger directly at my mother's face. "And what did you do with that legacy, Vivian?" she demanded. "You turned it into a cheap, shallow masquerade. You prostituted the wealth I built to appease a racist family that mocks you behind your back. You sacrificed a brilliant, hardworking daughter who actually inherited my grit, all to protect a lazy, entitled girl who measures her self-worth in internet validation and country club invitations." Grandma Josephine shook her head, an expression of profound sorrow and disgust crossing her weathered features. "That is not Black excellence. That is a minstrel show performed for people who secretly despise you." "You did not keep us on top," I fired back, stepping up beside my grandmother to deliver the final blow. "You dragged us into the gutter. Real excellence is not about what luxury car you drive to Sunday service, or what zip code your husband's racist parents live in. Real excellence is absolute integrity. It is building something that cannot be repossessed by a bank or subpoenaed by the FBI. You traded your soul for the illusion of status, and now you have absolutely neither." My father Marcus stood silently by the large bay window. He had traded his role as a loving father to play the part of a powerful patriarch, only to be exposed as a coward who let his wife cannibalize one child to feed the other. He stared out into the dark, freezing night, completely unwilling to face the destruction he had allowed into his home. I looked at the beautiful, lavish Thanksgiving dinner sitting completely cold on the table behind me. It was the perfect metaphor for the Harrison family. It looked incredible from the outside, perfectly styled, incredibly expensive, and impeccably presented. But underneath the expensive silver platters and the crystal wine glasses, it was entirely rotten. I looked at the three of them, entirely stripped of their lies, their stolen money, and their fake prestige. They had sacrificed me at the altar of their vanity, completely unaware that they were handing me the exact matches I would use to burn their entire fraudulent kingdom to the ground. The heavy silence following my declaration hung in the dining room, thick and suffocating. The entire atmosphere had shifted from a volatile shouting match to the eerie, frozen quiet of a graveyard. Then, from the corner of the room, a sound broke the stillness. It was a laugh. A dry, scraping, entirely desperate laugh coming from Todd. He pushed himself off the floor, his expensive suit wrinkled and ruined. He braced his hands against the wall, trying to summon the ghost of his former arrogance. The camera of my mind seemed to lock into place right then. An eye-level view, perfectly still, perfectly focused, framing the absolute wreckage of my brother-in-law. The chaotic energy of the room completely evaporated. I was the only thing moving. "You really think you have won?" Todd sneered, wiping a layer of cold sweat from his pale forehead. "You have some metadata. You have a few server logs. So what? Do you have any idea how the real world actually works? Nia, you think you can just walk into a federal courtroom and file a lawsuit against me? Do you know what high-power corporate litigators cost?" He took a shaky step forward, pointing a trembling finger at my faded sweater. "You are a homeless girl. You are washing your face in gas station bathrooms and eating out of vending machines. You do not have a single dime to your name. I will hire a defense team that will drag this out in civil and criminal court for a decade. I will bury you in endless legal filings, continuances, and procedural delays until you literally starve to death on the street. You cannot afford to fight me. You cannot even afford a warm bed." I did not raise my voice. I did not react to his pathetic, flailing attempt to regain control. I simply reached out and placed my hands on the rugged casing of my forensic laptop. I closed the lid. The heavy mechanical snap of the latch locking into place echoed like a gunshot across the mahogany table. I unzipped the hidden front compartment of my canvas backpack. I bypassed the cables and hard drives, reaching past the tools of my digital trade. I withdrew a thick, heavy legal folder. It was not a standard manila envelope. It was bound in thick parchment and sealed with a heavy official red wax stamp from a corporate registry office. I placed the folder directly in the center of the dining table, right next to the discarded federal badge. "You are right about exactly one thing, Todd," I said, my voice echoing with a calm, terrifying stillness. "I have been sleeping in my car. I have been rationing cheap food and surviving the freezing nights with nothing but a thin blanket." I looked him dead in the eye, watching the forced bravado slowly drain from his face. But I was not living in my car because I was broke. I was living in my car because I am a highly calculating, extremely patient woman who required maximum liquid capital. My mother, who had been quietly weeping into her hands, suddenly stopped. She lowered her arms, staring at the red-sealed folder on the table with a look of profound, dawning confusion. Chloe stopped hyperventilating, her tear-streaked face turning toward me. "3 months ago, on the exact same week that you and my mother systematically destroyed my credit score and froze my primary bank accounts, I completed a separate, highly classified, independent contract," I explained, keeping my posture entirely relaxed. I had spent the previous 2 years engineering a proprietary zero-day threat detection software protocol for a sector of the federal government. They liked my work. They liked it so much that they decided to purchase the exclusive commercial licensing rights to my code. I tapped my index finger twice against the heavy legal folder. The payout for that software acquisition was not a monthly salary, I stated, enunciating every single syllable so the reality of the situation could fully penetrate their minds. It was a single lump sum direct wire transfer of $2.4 million. Chloe let out a sharp, choked gasp. Her eyes bulged as she stared at me. My father Marcus actually stumbled backward, his shoulder hitting the bay window behind him. $2.4 million. The exact kind of generational wealth my mother had spent her entire life trying to project, and I had earned it entirely on my own in secret without a single ounce of their help. Todd swallowed so hard I could hear the click in his throat. He shook his head, a frantic, disjointed movement. If you had $2 million, you would not be sleeping in a grocery store parking lot. He stammered, his voice rising in sheer panic. You would have unfrozen your accounts. You would have rented a luxury apartment. You are lying. You are bluffing to scare me. I did not unfreeze my compromised accounts because I did not want to alert the people who had stolen my identity, I replied smoothly. I routed that federal payout directly through an independent, highly secured financial proxy. I needed that cash completely untouched and completely untraceable. Because the moment I discovered that my own family had orchestrated a massive real estate fraud against me, I stopped looking for a comfortable apartment. I started looking for a weapon. I stepped away from the table, pacing slowly toward Todd, forcing him to shrink back against the wall. I used the free Wi-Fi from the grocery store parking lot to run a comprehensive background check on your entire commercial real estate network. I told him, my eyes locking onto his terrified face. I bypassed your shell companies. I ignored your fake social media posts. I traced your broker-dealer license straight to the top. Your entire operation, your office lease, your commission structure, and your corporate franchise rights, they are all governed by a single parent company, Vanguard Investment Group. The color completely vanished from Todd's face. He looked like a man who had just been diagnosed with a terminal illness. He knew exactly what Vanguard Investment Group was. It was the massive corporate umbrella that held the keys to his entire professional existence. They were a privately held firm, and they were looking for a silent majority equity partner to inject fresh capital into their commercial sector. I continued, stopping just a few feet away from him. So I took my $2.4 million. Every single cent of my federal payout, every dollar I had earned through years of grueling, relentless work. I did not buy a warm bed. I did not buy a hot meal. I took all of my liquid cash and I bought a controlling ownership stake in Vanguard Investment Group. I turned back to the table and gestured toward the red sealed folder. Those are the finalized corporate acquisition documents, I stated. They were signed, sealed, and legally recorded at 8 o'clock yesterday morning. I am not just a victim of your real estate fraud, Todd. I am the majority shareholder of the parent company that holds the absolute legal authority over your entire brokerage firm. My mother let out a weak, breathless sound. She looked from me, the daughter she had deemed a pathetic failure, to the red-sealed folder containing more wealth and corporate power than she had ever managed to achieve in her entire life. She had sold me out to protect a broke, fraudulent son-in-law, completely unaware that she was handing me over to a self-made millionaire. I own your master lease, Todd, I said, driving the final nail into his professional coffin. I own your franchise rights. I own the operational license you need to legally conduct a single real estate transaction in this state. You thought I could not afford a lawyer to sue you in civil court. You are absolutely right. I am not going to sue you. I am going to completely liquidate you. I stepped back, allowing the sheer crushing magnitude of my corporate checkmate to fully settle over the room. I had not just defeated them. I had bought the very ground they stood on, and now I was going to pull it right out from under their feet. The warm, ambient glow of the dining room chandelier seemed to physically cool, casting long, harsh shadows across the table. I rested my hand on the red-sealed folder one last time before looking up. My gaze locked directly onto Todd. I did not blink. A slow, razor-sharp half-smile spread across my face. The absolute terror in his pale eyes was the most satisfying reward I could have ever asked for. As of 8 o'clock yesterday morning, I became your highest-ranking executive. I stated, my voice echoing with pure, unfiltered authority. I already signed your termination notice, and I have frozen every dollar of your commission accounts, pending an FBI investigation into suspected money laundering. Todd let out a strangled, pathetic gasp. His knees completely buckled, and he collapsed back into his dining chair, staring at me as if I had just signed his death warrant. The mention of the FBI broke whatever tiny delusional thread of hope he had been clinging to. He knew exactly what was hidden in his financial ledgers. He knew the offshore transfers, the forged client signatures, and the fabricated loan applications were all sitting on a silver platter, fully exposed by the very forensic analyst he had tried to render homeless. Chloe scrambled backward, pressing her back against the expensive wallpaper, her hands flying to her mouth to stifle a scream. She looked at the man she had married for status and wealth, finally realizing she had chained herself to a rapidly sinking ship. She had traded her own sister for a life of luxury that was actually built on a foundation of federal felonies. My mother, Vivian, sat completely paralyzed in her chair. The great megachurch event director could not formulate a single lie, a threat, or a prayer to save herself from the absolute devastation I had just unleashed upon her perfect plastic life. "You cannot do this!" Todd whispered, his voice cracking into a high-pitched, desperate whine as he clutched the edge of the mahogany table. "You have to let me call my lawyer. You have to give me time to pack my things. You cannot just throw me out tonight." "You do not need to pack a single thing," I replied smoothly, crossing my arms over my chest, "because your new accommodations are already fully furnished and waiting for you." At that exact moment, a sharp, piercing wail cut through the heavy silence of the mansion. It started as a distant shriek, rapidly growing louder and more urgent as it tore through the quiet, affluent suburban neighborhood. Blinding red and blue lights began flashing furiously through the sheer curtains of the grand bay window, painting the horrified faces of my family in alternating strokes of neon color. The loud, unmistakable screech of multiple police sirens echoed violently through the front gates of the estate. Heavy tires crunched aggressively against the gravel driveway, followed instantly by the authoritative slam of car doors. I looked at Todd and my mother, my smile cementing into a look of absolute, undeniable victory. The trap had permanently snapped shut. The heavy oak front doors of the mansion did not just open, they burst inward with a violent, shattering force that echoed through the entire house. Before my father could even think to move, a team of uniformed police officers and two plainclothes federal agents swarmed into the grand foyer. Their heavy boots pounded against the expensive hardwood, bringing the inescapable reality of federal justice straight into my parents' pristine dining room. They did not ask for permission to enter. They simply held up a stack of official arrest warrants. Todd tried to scramble backward, knocking his heavy dining chair to the floor in a desperate, pathetic attempt to escape. But a federal agent was already there, grabbing him by the shoulder, spinning him around, and slamming him face first against the custom wallpaper. The sharp metallic click of cold steel handcuffs snapping shut around his wrists cut through the room. Chloe began to scream hysterically. She reached out, grasping wildly for our mother, begging her to do something, to call someone to fix it. But Vivian just sat there, completely paralyzed, hyperventilating as an officer read her golden child her Miranda rights. Chloe was dragged out the front door, her designer heels scraping across the expensive Persian rug, crying for a high society bailout that was never going to come. That Thanksgiving night marked the absolute permanent end of the Harrison family illusion. The fallout was swift, brutal, and entirely merciless. When the explicit details of the wire fraud, the stolen property, and the identity theft hit the local Atlanta news cycle, my parents lost everything they had spent their lives protecting. The mega-church congregation, the very people Vivian had sacrificed my safety to impress, immediately convened an emergency board meeting. My mother was publicly stripped of her events director title and permanently banned from the executive committee. My father's remaining business partners severed all ties overnight. Their accounts were drained by exorbitant legal fees. Their exclusive country club memberships were aggressively revoked, and they were left completely bankrupt, drowning in the exact public shame they had committed federal crimes to avoid. Amidst the flashing police lights and the chaos of that ruined dinner, Grandma Josephine slowly walked around the table. She did not spare a single glance for her defeated son or her weeping daughter-in-law. She walked straight to me and pulled me into a fierce, unwavering embrace. She whispered that she had never been prouder of anyone in her entire life. The very next morning, she instructed Mr. Desmond to draw up new ironclad paperwork. She legally bypassed my parents entirely and officially transferred full, absolute control of the Harrison family estate, every trust, every commercial property, and every investment directly into my name. The chaotic screaming echoes of that dining room fade away, replaced by the warm, quiet stillness of my current life. The scene transitions smoothly. I am sitting on a plush velvet sofa in the center of my own luxury penthouse living room. The evening city skyline glows brightly through the massive windows behind me. The camera slowly dollies backward, pulling away at a measured, deliberate pace, creating a vast, expanding sense of space and absolute freedom around me. I am no longer trapped in a freezing car. I am no longer boxed in by abusive relatives holding my future hostage. I am completely untouchable. I reach out and pick up a crystal glass of deep red wine from the table in front of me. I hold it up, letting the ambient city light catch the rich, dark color of the liquid. I look directly into the camera lens, holding eye contact with absolute, unyielding certainty. Family isn't made up of people who share your blood just to drain your life. If they choose to treat you like a stain, make sure you become the most expensive stain they can never erase. The screen slowly fades to black.